Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the third episode in which Namikaze Naruto was an Anbu captain before the Hokage, Orochimaru, killed him with the Mangekyo Sharingan. He has now been sent to a new world, where he hopes to prevent a similar fate from befalling Konoha. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Konoha, morning, there was some light whispering in the darkness. "Sensei, how's he doing?" Namikaze's body was refusing to work. The last thing he remembered was collapsing in a card game against Naruto Uzumaki, his alternate self. "He'll be fine, Sakura. He and Naruto were doing something stupid 2 nights ago, and this is the final result." "What?" Namikaze thought, "I've been out for a day. I can't believe it. I was supposed to help Sakura yesterday continue with her jutsus. Now." He tried again to move a bit, and found his eyes almost operable. He squinted, forcing his eyes open. The fluorescent ceiling light blinded him, but he didn't close his eyes. Team 7 was standing around his bed. There was a flower in a nearby jar, which somewhat touched Namikaze. The pink-haired girl saw his eyes open and shouted, "Namikaze-san. You're awake." Sasuke gave a small smirk, "HN, and you're supposed to be a jounin. What self-respecting ninja knocks himself out playing a card game with the dobe here?" He pointed at Naruto, who occupied the nearby bed. Naruto was already awake due to the fact that he was younger and slightly more energetic than the older version of himself. The jounin muttered something under his breath. Sasuke was surprised, because he could have sworn he heard, "Team." A doctor came in and said, "Namikaze-san, looks like you're finally awake. You probably feel quite weak. A good meal will take care of that. The best cure for exhaustion is a day's worth of rest, so you should be released in a couple hours." The medic left. Kakashi walked a bit closer to the jounin's bed. Another of his perverted books was in hand, Ika Swords. 1. Namikaze blushed a bit and said in a weak tone, "Little brat was good. I've never failed to win a poker game in my life, or any gambling game as well." Kakashi gave an eye smile, while in the corner Naruto grumbled something about Sasuke being a bastard. Then, another chakra presence could be felt in the room. Only skilled jounin could detect it, but it was there. Namikaze smiled and muttered, "Hello, Anko." The snake jounin dropped through a removed panel in the ceiling and landed in a crouch. Anko was smirking, "Yo, pervert. I heard that the kid overgave you one hell of a run for your money." Namikaze narrowed his eyes at the woman, "Quiet, Anka team. I'll have you know I've never lost a poker game ever." Anko bent over and whispered, "That's not what I saw." The jounin felt her breath on his ear, and he blushed a bit. Anko backed up and smirked, pleased that she had caused some level of embarrassment to his annoying teammate. He said, "TCH, why are you here? Are you just visiting me so that you can kick me when I'm down?" "Not a bad idea, but I'm pretty sure the medics wouldn't be too pleased if I did that." "No, I came to make sure my partner would be fit to go in a couple days. We have 4 days until our probation ends, and then we'll get a mission." Anko walked out of range of Namikaze's sights, but could hear everything that happened next. Several hissing sounds, the screams and Naruto and Sakura, the laughter of Anko, and a dull thud on the concrete floor. Then came feet scampering, the click of shoes, and the turning of a page. Namikaze's sweat dropped as the image of what just happened passed through his mind. Anko decides to torture Naruto with a couple of her snakes. Sakura and Naruto both panic, causing Naruto to fall backwards out of the bed. The genin picks himself up and runs to the far towards the door with Anko chasing after the kid. Then, another voice sounds over the chaos, "Anko, stop this foolishness. You should not set your snakes on bedridden genin." That was Kakashi. Something exploded and he smelled chakra-induced smoke. The door creaked, and Namikaze's eyes turned to catch the women exiting the white door. She smiled at the Jounin and said, "See ya around, brat, and little brat. I'll introduce two of my friends to you later. I'm sure they'll love to get acquainted." The door slammed behind her. Naruto shivered and said, "That woman is absolutely insane." Namikaze smiled and looked to the ceiling. "Yeah, but she's insane in a good way." Everyone looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Namikaze spoke up again, "Kakashi, could you send everyone out of here for a few minutes? I would like to talk to you alone about something." Kakashi blinked behind his book, closing it, and asked everyone to leave the room for a few minutes. Namikaze's nose could only sense 3 people in the room now. He said, "Naruto as well. He should be recovered enough by now. Besides, it will only be for no longer than 30 minutes at most." Kakashi nodded, and Naruto left with a small amount of confusion. Namikaze paused for a good 10 seconds. He forced his body to lean up against the back of the wall, which was easier than a few minutes ago. His energy was certainly returning. He looked Kakashi in the eye with a serious expression and said, "What is Naruto Uzumaki's relation to the Yondaime Hokage?" Kakashi's eyes went wide in shock. What are you talking about?" "There is no connection," the Jounin shook his head, "don't lie to me. 3 days ago at the ramen stand, you told Sakura that Naruto wasn't related to me. Then, you explained how the Yondaime didn't have any living relatives besides me. It got me thinking, who is the Yondaime Hokage, at least in this world? I knew next to nothing about Minato Namikaze in my world, because he died before he could become Hokage. So, I looked it up. The Yondaime Hokage looks almost exactly like I do with a few obvious exceptions. There's absolutely no way that could happen by accident. Furthermore, Ibiki gave the game a little bit further away when I got here." Flashback. Namikaze's eyes went wide in fury. "What the hell are you talking about? I am an Anbu captain. I even worked under you for a time at the torture and interrogations building. This building, you idiot." The Anbu pulled off his mask, revealing what appeared to be the face of Minato Namikaze. Ibiki gasped and said, "It can't be Yondaime-sama." Naruto Namikaze looked confused at the man. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, you idiot. I'm not. And have never been the Hokage, let alone that bastard snake. I'll kill him and free Konoha from his reign of terror, you better believe me." End flashback. So Kakashi, tell me the truth. Kakashi sighed and said, "You have to understand, Minato-sensei had some powerful enemies. We couldn't tell him. Hold on. You don't know?" Namikaze shook his head. Kakashi continued, "Naruto is the son of the Yondaime Hokage. And by extension, you are probably the son of the Minato in your world. This means you'll probably have some of the same enemies he had, because you look so much like sensei." Namikaze took it in with shock. He never even thought about his parents. There was silence for a good 5 minutes as it sunk in. Kakashi was starting to get worried. He debated to bring in another medic to look him over when a noise suddenly split the silence. "Ha!" Naruto Namikaze's mouth curved into a genuine smile, which was so different from his usual one. Tears started streaming down his face as he started laughing in delight. Kakashi exhaled the breath he'd been holding and chuckled as well. The two laughed for a couple minutes and then fell silent again. Namikaze said with a happier tone than usual, "Thank you, Kakashi-senpai. Ah. I feel much better knowing I'm related to such a great man. You think you could tell me more about him someday? And my younger counterpart, because he'd love to know about Minato as well someday." Kakashi said, "I'd be happy to. Remember though, he's probably a bit different from the one in your world." Namikaze replied, I know. Ah, I can't wait to get out of this bed. Naruto can return now." The copycat ninja sighed and said, "Naruto's already left." Namikaze tilted his head in confusion. The older Jounin pointed to a table across the room and explained, Naruto took his clothes with him. He's not coming back inside when he can go out for ramen right now. It'll be only a couple seconds when the medics burst in. 3, 2, 1, now. Two medics burst into the room and looked to see Naruto gone. Namikaze looked in awe at the Jounin. I see I still have much to learn, senpai. A strange occurrence happened in the night before Namikaze awoke. At the center of the village under the Hokage Tower, four elders of the village were constantly projecting a chakra genjutsu field, which detected any attempt to infiltrate the village. However, for the briefest second, the genjutsu broke, and then re-established 1 second later. Sarutobi was notified and she sent in 2 ninja, Sparrow and Wolf, out to see if someone could have slipped through the interval. 5 hours later at roughly 6 a.m., neither ninja had reported back. The old man was slightly worried. He considered putting the village in a state of alert. Enko was resting in the early morning hours just outside the hospital. Namikaze would be released in a couple hours, and today there were no people to torture, so she waited. It was moderately windy that day, with the shorter branches swaying in the wind. However, she didn't mind the weather. The door slid open, and a Jounin and 3 genin exited the building. Enko rose, zeroing in on her target. She clenched her fist in a small amount of frustration as a memory of the casino crossed her vision. Flashback: Enko sat down at the table where Naruto and Namikaze were playing each other in poker. Neither player seemed to want to give in, even though they had exactly the same number of chips as the other. Namikaze called for 2 while Naruto called 3. In the end, both players had 2 pair aces and tens with a king high. Enko's eyes widened. The next several hands were straights, flushes, and every other combo where both players split the pots evenly. Enko laughed and said, "How on earth are you so pathetic, pervert? You should be crushing him as a Jounin. However, you're drawing a genin." She was, of course, referring to the fact that Namikaze wasn't cheating. Namikaze gritted his teeth and said, "Wouldn't matter anyway. Kid's so lucky that if I'd pull a royal flush on him by cheating, he'd draw into 1. I've tried it once. So, I'll just go with my luck." Enko sighed and said to Naruto, "You've got to be kidding me. Move aside, I'll show you how to beat this perverted brat." Namikaze sighed and said, "All right, but let's make it more interesting." There was a gleam in his eye. Enko got the same gleam and said, "Interesting, what do you have in mind?" The Jounin replied, "If I win, you have to take over training Sakura in genjutsu for a day. To be honest, it's not really my specialty anyway. However, I know you had some training in it as a former hunter." Enko smirked and said, "All right, but if I win, you have to buy me as much dango and sake as I want for a week." Namikaze just blinked at this. She was like a ravenous wolf when consuming those 2 things. Then, Namikaze nodded his head. The 2 shook and the match began. Enko flopped 2 aces on the very first play. She smirked and said, "Let's make this more interesting. I bet you 30,000 ryu." Namikaze looked solemnly at his hand and said, "All right. I take your bet. Now, how many cards do you want?" Enko traded in 2, while Namikaze traded 4. The female Jounin chuckled to herself. "No wonder he can't defeat this brat," she thought, "he's terrible at this game to trade in 4 cards." She didn't bother trying to look at his cards. He was probably skilled enough to prevent her information-gathering jutsus from working. Not that it mattered in her opinion. She had drawn 2 kings to create a full house. And he had nothing at all. Enko bet him again, this time raising it to 100,000 ryu. Namikaze placed the money down without a second's hesitation. He then said, "I'll raise 30,000 more ryu." Enko was shocked. She paused for a second, and then committed. She smirked as the full house was revealed. He nodded in appreciation of the impressive hand. "You're good Anko, but not good enough." He revealed a straight flush from 5 to 9. Anko was dumbfounded. Her mouth was hanging down. Namikaze said, "Then you'll be taking over for Sakura's genjutsu training. Think of it as practice for when you decide to get your own genin squad." End flashback. Luckily, the snake Jounin knew when to cut her losses. Anko walked over to Kakashi and said, "Kakashi, I need to borrow Sakura. Namikaze asked me to take over for her training for today." Two black shadows watched as the snake Kunoichi and copy ninja Kakashi walked away from the hospital. The two moved fast, scaling the side of the building and slipping through an open window. They exited the room and entered the hallway, seeking out someone who might know where Namikaze was being held. There was an unfortunate nurse who was examining a list of hospital patients. She was grabbed from the pristinely clean hallways and dragged into the closest patient room. The patient tried to rise, but was quickly subdued with a paralyzing agent the two had prepared beforehand. The shadows were two Anbu, Konoha Anbu. The nurse tried screaming, but had her mouth clamped by the first. The second administered the Jigyaku no Jutsu, time reversal technique, to find out where Namikaze was located. It took little time at all, and they were already on the move in 5 minutes. The nurse was put into a genjutsu-induced sleep. They slammed through the door with kunais drawn. However, there was no one on the inside. The window was open and cool air was being blown inside. Namikaze had sensed the arrival of the two of them 30 seconds before they burst into the room. Something sensed off about them, as if something was interfering with their chakra. So, he climbed out of the window. On the next floor down, there was an open window that he slipped through and waited. It was about 5 minutes before they departed for unknown destinations. He sighed. The Jounin was still feeling pretty weak, but his energy was rapidly returning to him. He moved out into the hallway and made his way quickly to the exit. The Jounin ducked, as two kunai flew overhead. As he continued, he glanced over his shoulder. Down the white hallways, the two Anbu were following on his tail. Several patients had to move to the side as Naruto Namikaze ran straight down the center of the white hallway. He turned a corner and continued his retreat. His clothes were in his hands, so he reached inside and grabbed a couple smoke bombs. He tossed them forward, and they exploded. The smoke alarms went off, causing the staff to start evacuating as fast as they could. Namikaze entered the cloud, then dove through a recently opened door. After he landed inside, the door slammed shut with a blast of wind chakra. The patients in the room had no time to react as the Jounin threw himself through the open window. The Anbu, meanwhile, paused inside the cloud trying to figure out where their mark just went. A few seconds later, muffled sounds could be heard behind one doorway. They burst through and saw both patients looking out the window. They gave immediate pursuit in Namikaze's general direction. Suddenly, a section of the room shimmered silvery and then vanished completely. Namikaze appeared where there once was nothing. The patients looked at him stunned. Both were Chunin, but Namikaze didn't recognize either one of them. The two Jounin had just given chase to a shadow clone while Namikaze moved inside a second with a small genjutsu that concealed him from sight. "Mind explaining why two of your Anbu are after my life, Hokage-sama?" asked Naruto-en. His face was livid with anger and frustration. The Hokage had arrived about 10 minutes later, and the two Chunins that were hospitalized didn't let the Jounin out. Namikaze decided to humor them rather than break out. After all, it wouldn't really look good for the Jounin on probation to knock out two of Konoha's finest. Instead, he sat down indignantly and waited for the Hokage to arrive. Sarutobi sighed and said, "Naruto, there was no authorized attempt on your life. Who were these two Anbu? Did you get a look at their masks?" Namikaze shook his head in reply. The Hokage had his suspicions as to who tried to assassinate Namikaze a few minutes ago, but he refused to explain for now. He wondered if the two Anbu he sent out earlier were the ones who attempted to murder his newest Tokubesta Jounin. Regardless, the entire building and even most of Konoha were on the alert. 5 hours later, Ichiraku Ramen Namikaze guzzled down another bowl of ramen. This one was his 5th bowl. He reverted to his old ways when under stress, especially after someone just attempted to murder him, in his own village. Old man Ichiraku's was pleased that he was getting so much business today. Naruto had already come in after his tree climbing training, and now his newest customer was proving to be a real boon for his business. Behind the Jounin, someone walked by without saying a word. Then, there was a yawn. Namikaze froze and turned around. Sure enough, there walked a black-haired kid with lazy eyes, a gray shirt with a fishnet under that, and brown long pants. Shikamaru muttered something under his breath as he walked by. Namikaze turned around on his seat and said, "So, how's Asuma-senpai doing these days?" The genin stopped in his tracks and contemplated ignoring the odd ninja who was addressing him. Then, he figured it was too troublesome and continued walking away. Namikaze finished his bowl and set down some ryu that covered the meal and tip. Ichiraku thanked him for his patronage. Shikamaru sighed as he heard the footsteps approach. He kept walking, even though the Jounin caught up. "How did you know who I was?" Shikamaru asked, not really caring too much. Namikaze paused for a second, came up with an appropriate lie, and started, "I've seeking to become a Jounin squad leader. All the leaders who don't have a team scout out who they may or may not want on their team. Everyone who was serious, that is. Some get a random team that they don't want." Shikamaru stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Namikaze. As soon as he looked at the Jounin, he once again turned and kept on going. "Hold up. What are you doing, you troublesome brat?" Shikamaru replied, "Leaving before things get even more troublesome, Naruto." "How'd you know my name?" "We've never met." A lie by all accounts but one. Namikaze hadn't met with Shikamaru in this world. No one but Naruto eats 5 bowls of ramen. "What's with the henge? You didn't do a very good job of hiding yourself from me." Namikaze smirked and closed the gap with the Nara air. He ruffled Shikamaru's head and said, "Nope, sorry, but I'm a different, older Naruto, Naruto Namikaze." "Nice to meet you." Shikamaru grumbled under his breath. Who the heck is he trying to fool? Is it a new game he's playing? After this entered his head, another thought rose to strangle it: what if it's an enemy ninja? That would a real hassle. Why do I have to deal with this? He then thought, only an idiot would attempt to infiltrate the village as Naruto and fail so utterly. Namikaze continued, "I knew your sensei. He was a good man and a dangerous brawler. He sparred with Asuma once shortly before his death. Naruto was utterly defeated at the time." Shikamaru made a mental note of the word "was" and filed it away for further thought. He said, "How do you know Asuma sensei?" The Jounin flinched visibly as they walked down the crowded street. He forgot for a moment who he was facing, Shikamaru Nara, the lazy genius of Konoha. He looked away and said nervously, "Can't really say, the Hokage classified it." The lazy genin looked dubiously at the Jounin by his side, but let it slide. Asuma himself would probably give him the answer anyway. The two traveled to the Nara compound where Shikamaru expected the older Jounin to leave, but Namikaze followed him through the large entrance. Namikaze said, "So, you have any experience at shogi? I know Asuma is terrible, but, if you want a more decent opponent." The young man gave no response. He climbed the wooden stairs to the long porch, slid open the door, and walked through, leaving behind a surprised Namikaze. Shikamaru never turned down a shogi challenge. However, he was proven right when the Nara boy walked through the sliding door once again carrying the shogi board. As the two set up the board, Namikaze's mind wandered to another time and place. Flashback: 3 years ago, Shikamaru moved the knight into place, checkmating Naruto's king. The orange-clothed Chunin grumbled at the loss, which was his 113th loss since they began playing together. Naruto had taken over for Asuma as his opponent. 2. The Jounin looked up to meet Naruto's eyes and said, "You know why you lost, right?" Naruto retorted sarcastically, "Because my king was checkmated?" Shikamaru sat back and countered, "No, it's because you failed to anticipate how your opponent, myself, would react. Try thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of your opponent, setting them up to walk right into the trap you set." Naruto grumbled, but then stopped when he realized his friend was right. It led to the 114th game right after that. Naruto concentrated, trying to anticipate where his opponent might go, but he was still slaughtered. The blonde Chunin nearly screamed in frustration. Nara just chuckled and said, "Don't worry, Naruto. You did much better than last time. To be honest, I can plan out your next dozen moves and about 200 possibilities after that." Naruto said, "Then why do I bother playing again? It's not as if I can ever hope to plan 12 moves in advance." Shikamaru replied, "One day, you might. But, it will take many years for that to happen." He pushed his hand towards Naruto, which held one of the pieces from the board. "Do you see this piece?" Naruto replied, "Yeah, it's a rook, a piece which can travel as many spaces as it wants up, down, left or right. It's a piece designed to be used as a match finisher. While a knight," he showed the knight in his other hand, "can only travel in L-shaped directions, it is the hardest piece to capture. It takes great skill to capture it." He set the pieces down and said, "I'll figure out the strategy, while you finish the match no matter what it takes." The silence between the two of them was thick, but lasted for only a couple seconds. Naruto started grinning and Shikamaru returned it with a calm smirk. End flashback. Namikaze sighed as his eyes were facing the sky while he waited for Shikamaru's first move. He could always trust Shikamaru with anything. Checkmate. Namikaze was startled out of his musings as he looked at the board. Apparently, the Jounin and Genin had been playing during Namikaze's musings. Namikaze muttered, "There's no way." Sure enough, Namikaze's king was in complete checkmate. "So it is, huh?" Namikaze's face contorted and he started pouting. Shikamaru sighed and thought, "There can be no mistake, that's Naruto's pout right there when told something he didn't want to hear." He looked at the board, pondering, but still, Naruto managed to counter my first 5 strategies with ease. If he had been paying full attention, I might not have won at all. Namikaze was still wondering how this happened when there was a burst of killer intent aimed at the two of them. There was a small whistle as several somethings flew at them. The Jounin kicked the shogi board, pushing Shikamaru out of the way of the attack. The blonde Jounin also used his contact with the board to push himself away. They flew several feet apart down their respective sections of the patio. Several dozen kunai, shuriken and senbon littered the distance between Naruto and Shikamaru. Several kunai went flying as Namikaze returned the attack to the forested section of the compound. He shouted, "Shika, get your father now." The Jounin had his katana out in a second and was deflecting kunai and senbon at an impressive rate. The Nara boy moved around the corner to get some cover and shouted back, "My dad's at the bar. Who are these guys, to attack us in broad daylight like that on clan grounds? Probably the same idiots who tried to kill me earlier today." Namikaze looked across the distance between his attackers and the field. It was probably within range of the Nara's shadow jutsu, but he was unsure. So, he had to close the distance. It was difficult, focusing the chakra without a single hand sign, but he managed to do it. He teleported between him and the forest section. However, he just barely ducked a sharpened kunai which would have taken his head off. The surprise was enough to give an opening. The attacker took the chance and swung his kunai at the Jounin. Suddenly, the attacker stopped inches from skewering the back of Namikaze's head. Shikamaru's shadow was attached to the two Anbu Namikaze knew the shadow wasn't bound to hold them for long. He pulled out a sword and took a swing at both his foes together. However, his attack cut through two logs, as the original assailants had substituted away a millisecond before Shikamaru got them. Shikamaru sighed and said, "They got away. You nearly got decapitated there, what happened?" Namikaze paused again in surprise. Whatever just happened, the Jounins had anticipated Namikaze's Kaze Shuinpa Jutsu. Furthermore, they had fully planned on him doing it. However, there was one thing he knew for sure: he would beat the answers out of them and enjoy doing. He was contemplating an appropriate torture when a thought struck Namikaze. He pulled out more kunai and said, "Shikamaru-kun, get out of here now." "They are still here." Shikamaru blinked in some surprise. He nodded and went running. The Jounin shouted, "All right, you two, now I'm alone." "Who the hell are you?" Two cloaked figures with Anbu masks appeared in the clearing. They wore the masks of a sparrow and a wolf. Wolf was already forming hand signs already. Namikaze moved in, throwing several kunai along the way. Sparrow took up a guarding position and deflected the kunai with one of his own kunai. Wolf finished and said, "Ninpo Kuchios, Katan, Hausa Buhadii no Jutsu, Ninja Art Summoning, Fire Element, Fire Burrower Technique." A thin strand of fire shot up from the dirt and wrapped around Namikaze's ankle. He was suddenly stopped in his tracks. The instant smoke entered his nostrils, he snapped open one of his pouches on his Jounin vest. A scroll fell into his hands. Namikaze opened it and threw it on the ground. In no time flat, he released the seal and formed the necessary hand signs: Suetun, Suijin Hiki no Jutsu, Water Element, Water Encampment Technique. Water flowed out of the seal and suddenly surrounded Namikaze. The fire jutsu sputtered out just as it finished burning through his clothing. An instant later, a snake composed of water shot out from the wall towards the two ninja. Both dodged in opposite directions. The water snake suddenly split in two, both chasing after their respected ninja. Sparrow was backed into a tree, where he jumped over the attack into the branches. That water snake pierced the tree like it was nothing. Wolf sidestepped the attack and attempted to slash apart the snake. It was useless, as the water blew away his kunai. Then, that water snake wrapped itself around the Anbu. He used the kawarimi to escape before the attack finished encircling the ninja. The two connected attack jutsus retreated to the puddle of water, and the water barrier fell. In its place, Namikaze stood without a single injury. He popped his neck and raced towards where the two ninja stood in the tree. Sparrow formed several hand signs this time and shouted, "Doton, Yamaboketsu, Earth Release, Mountain Grave Technique, 4. The ground below Namikaze shot up, sending the Jounin flying into the air. Then, several other sections of the ground shot up as well from multiple angles, all aimed at Namikaze. The Konoha Jounin spun in the air, pulling out his short katana and slashing apart each rock section before it made impact. The Jounin landed on his feet on one of new outcroppings and raced down its side. Sparrow formed a new set of hand signs and said, "Doton, Sabure Wana no Jutsu, Earth Release, Sand Trap Technique." The Jounin suddenly found himself chest-deep encased in the stone. Wolf appeared in front of Namikaze, swinging a standard Anbu katana, 5. However, a wave of wind chakra split the stone spike apart, freeing Namikaze just in time to block the attack with his own short katana. Namikaze fell a couple feet down and used Kaze Shuinpa to surprise Sparrow with a sneak attack. As soon as Namikaze reappeared in front of Sparrow, however, there was now a katana sticking out of his gut. Sparrow pierced the Jounin. Namikaze looked around, and then said, "Iz." He coughed up some blood. Sparrow started speaking with a deep voice, "Namikaze, brother or cousin of Minato Namikaze, we will claim your bounty right here and now." The Jounin looked confused. Sparrow continued, "IWA has paid good money, 100 million ryu, to have you eliminated. Blame your own reliance on that jutsu for your death. Namikaze grinned through a blood-filled mouth. He said, you know, I'm fairly impressed. You. He coughed up some blood on the Anbu before continuing, you filled the forest area with a small amount of smoke, just barely visible to the naked eye. Kaze Shuunpa cleared a large enough amount of smoke that you could see where I would be. Wolf appeared next to Namikaze's skewered form and Sparrow and continued the conversation, yeah. Once we saw where you would be moving, we acted accordingly. He raised his sword and swung towards Namikaze's head to decapitate. In that instant, Namikaze smiled victoriously. He muttered, Suetun, Bunshin Daibakuha, water release, clone explosion. The clone exploded violently, spraying the entire forest section with syrup-like water. Wolf had committed to his attack, and was covered in the stuff. Sparrow managed to avoid the full blast, but was still ultimately trapped as the substance hit him too. From the puddle created earlier, Namikaze formed out of the water. He pulled out several Senbon and threw them at the two Jounin. Both were skewered with the attack. He said loud enough for the two of them to hear, Suetun, Mijuame Nabera Bunshin, syrup capture clone. As the water barrier fell, I entered the puddle while my clone stood in for me. Oh, by the way, those Senbons were laced with a special nerve concoction of a friend of mine. You should be unconscious right about. Two thuds could be heard as the Anbu pair sagged in their watery confinements, now. He sighed and continued, thanks for telling me the weakness of that jutsu. I'll be sure to come up with an appropriate countermeasure sooner or later. What I wonder is how you knew that jutsu, considering I've only used it once. Well, I look forward to your answers as Ibiki drags it out of you while you scream. He sat down at the base of the tree where the traitorous Anbu were stuck in the syrupy water. The puddle was visible in the distance, and the Jounin reflected on the battle. He muttered, to think, I had to use one of his jutsus to beat these scrum. Damn it, I vowed never to use them again, bastard snake. Sarutobi's POV smoke drifted into his face as he was smoking his long pipe. His telescope jutsu had been trained on his newest Tokubetsu Jounin for quite a while. The blonde-haired man who claimed to be Naruto Uzumaki was a troubling man, but had a good heart. Over the last couple weeks, he had watched the Jounin in his escapades around the village, winning vast amounts of ryu, training Team 7, eating and paying for the younger generation's ramen, carrying young Hinata to the hospital, and even his fight with the Anbu who now languish behind bars. When Sarutobi had first seen the Jounin through his crystal ball, he was troubled that someone had infiltrated the village. One lone Anbu captain could wreak all sorts of havoc. The old man was unsure how to handle him. His two aides had recommended putting the entire village on alert until the man was caught. Danzo wanted Sarutobi to have him executed on the Hokage tower that night Naruto turned himself in. Naruto, however, hadn't done any hostile actions against any of his ninja. There were reports from the two who were assigned to track Naruto down, Shikaku Nara and Enko Mitarashi. Sarutobi smiled as he remembered their reports. Young Enko wanted Naruto imprisoned without the possibility of release. She also was willing to oversee his torture, but the Hokage denied her request. However, she also reluctantly admitted the Jounin was probably no threat to the village. Shikaku's report was even more glowing. Though the young Anbu captain had managed to escape narrowly, not once did Naruto attempt to hurt or kill him, Inoichi or Chuza. The night Naruto turned himself in, Sarutobi wanted to believe the boy, but the safety of the village was his utmost concern. So, he had the ninja put in a cell and debated for 2 days what to do with him. There was a village law that allowed the Hokage to put a defecting Jounin on trial in front of the village council. The Hokage had the final decision to decide if Naruto would become a Konoha ninja or not. Sarutobi had gotten what he wanted in the end, a probationary period in which Namikaze could prove himself to be a capable Jounin loyal to Konoha. Furthermore, he had to make sure that his secret would not leave the council chambers. In the same manner as with the younger Naruto Uzumaki, he made it an class crime, punishable by death, to reveal the Jounin's true identity and origins. However, politics would still sour the day somewhat. His two advisors and Danzo, who still held political sway in the village, made sure that the Jounin wasn't a further danger to the village. He had been forced to add the stipulation that half the Jounin's chakra would be sealed away. There were no remaining talented seal masters in Konoha, as it was becoming somewhat of a lost art, so another, less skilled seal master was used. The process didn't go well, and 75% of Namikaze's chakra was sealed away. Flashback: Sarutobi watched as Rat applied the blood to Namikaze's hand and body. He said, "Namikaze, please forgive me. This was not my intention, but rather the will of the council." To his surprise, Namikaze said with a calming smile, "I know, Hokage-sama. Please, let us finish this quickly." Rat had finished the writing and began forming the hand signs. Namikaze sat in the center of the seal array, bracing himself for the terrible pain that would indeed come. He had a stick in his mouth so that he would not bite off his own tongue by accident and bleed to death. Seconds later, Rat had finished his technique. The array glowed brilliantly as chakra began being absorbed from the Jounin. Namikaze's teeth clenched down on the wooden piece in his mouth. The kanji glowed green and lifted off the ground, suspended in the air. They moved at a medium pace towards the hand. As each letter was absorbed into the circular seal, it began building a circle of black ink on the Jounin's hand. 20 seconds into the procedure, however, something unexpected happened. Red chakra began flowing freely from the Jounin's body. Sarutobi's eyes widened and Namikaze began screaming in pain. One tail of red chakra formed rapidly under his body. The Sandaime said, "Get Tenzo down here now." One of his Anbu aides vanished. Sarutobi began forming hand signs and ended with serpent. He used his chakra to dispel the chakra leaking from the seal. However, even though no more fox chakra would leak out, the already released chakra could leak into the new seal and destroy it. Luckily, Tenzo was down there in a very short amount of time. He used the Shodaime's Mokuton techniques to absorb the remaining fox chakra with his wooden jutsu and stabilize the seal. The kanji finally absorbed the remaining chakra and the glow ended. All that remained was a black circular seal with a spiral in the center. The stick fell from Naruto's mouth as he panted and fell forward. Tenzo caught him and lay him on his back. Sarutobi asked, "How do you feel?" Naruto whispered just loud enough for the Hokage to hear, "Something isn't right. I feel much weaker than I should." As they checked the seal, Rat gasped and said, "No way, Hokage-sama. In my surprise at the burst of chakra, I accidentally absorbed too much chakra into the seal. We can do it again in a couple days, hopefully this time without any interruptions from the demon." However, Namikaze cut him off, "No, it's all right. I'll work with this amount, thanks." The Jounin picked himself up and wobbled to the door. Sarutobi looked in wonder at the man. Without a doubt, that man is Naruto Uzumaki. He's Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. End flashback Naruto. Both Narutos deserved better than what they received from the village. One was a hero to the people for containing the fox. The second was punished for simply being in Konoha. The once god of shinobi now walked through the trees towards the monument. He often visited it and thought about the village, its past, present and future. In the past, there were Irika's parents, Minato Namikaze himself, Tsukumo Hatake, Obito Uchiha, and even all the Uchihas and especially Itachi Uchiha. The man was a true Konoha ninja, willing to put the needs of the village before his own. No one, sadly not even his brother, would ever know that it was him that prevented a civil war and the next shinobi war as well. He contemplated his failure in his diplomacy with the Uchiha clan. The unknown Uchiha, Madara Uchiha as he called himself, drove a wedge between the clan and the Hokage, resulting in Itachi's forced betrayal. As he passed through the swaying trees, his mind turned towards the future generation. All was not bleak, rather far from it. There were many bright pupils under some of his best jounin. His mind turned to Sakura, Ino, and Hinata. All three were at the beginning of the long and perilous road of the ninja. True, none of them particularly stood out, but he's willing to bet there's a bright future in store for all three of them. Then, there was Shikamaru, Chuji, Sasuke, Kiba and Shino. They were already showing signs that their futures would be incredible. His mind briefly wondered if he would be able to see them reach their potential. Finally, there was young Naruto Uzumaki. Sarutobi's growing smile doubled in size at the thought of the young boy. He knew that Naruto would succeed in being Hokage. His father was the greatest shinobi the village ever produced. Minato had created an unbeatable set of jutsu, and stopped a force of nature, the Kyubi no Kitsune. His mother was a stubborn red-headed woman. The old man and Kushina had gotten into many battles of wills. Furthermore, Naruto Namikaze is Naruto Uzumaki, although quite a bit older and more experienced. The young genin would grow into a fine ninja one day and an even greater Hokage. The trees parted way to the monument, revealing a young jounin with blonde hair, a red vest, a gray set of long robes, blue pants and blue sandals. Sure enough, Namikaze lay there on his back, looking at the sky and resting beside the monument. The Sandaime Hokage approached quietly, and listened. Sure was fun though, Sasuke, Sakura. Wish I didn't have to use that man's jutsu he helped me develop, but the other ones I would have used were too destructive. Tomorrow, I'll head in to watch them break those too. Though I guess it's not like how I used to be. Hinata is doing fine in this world. Both of you probably remembered what happened to her in ours. In our battle against Pain, she'd. He cut off for a moment. Sarutobi chose that moment to approach the jounin and make his presence known. Namikaze jumped to his feet with a kunai already in hand, and then he relaxed. He took a knee and said, Hokage-sama, sorry, but I get a bit jumpy when people sneak up on me. Sarutobi chuckled and replied, nothing to apologize for, my boy. You were just attacked in our village. If I'd been in your shoes, I'd also be a bit jumpy. Please, stand. He grabbed the jounin by the shoulders and pulled him up. He turned and looked at the monument. So, how are you adjusting to the village? Is everyone treating you well? Namikaze also looked at the stone and said, they treat me normally. In my Konoha, I was treated as the scourge, because everyone thought I was behind the disappearances. He then went into an explanation of how Orochimaru was in control of Konoha and experimenting on the civilians for immortality. Sarutobi's face took on a stony expression. He wasn't pleased with the report on his old apprentice in the older Naruto's world. The first time he heard about Orochimaru becoming Hokage, he was appalled, probably because the Sannin had betrayed his village and Sarutobi knew what the snake was capable of. Sarutobi said, for what it's worth, I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun. Namikaze Naruto smiled sadly, why? You couldn't have known the man would have done what he did after allowing his ascension to the seat of Hokage. The two stood in front of the stone for quite a while, silently honoring their dead comrades. After some time had passed, Sarutobi broke the silence. I heard that Kakashi told you about your father. Namikaze looked to the old man in some surprise. Yeah, he did. The Sandaime smiled as he focused on Minato's chiseled name on the stone. I knew him. He was a good man, and an even better friend. Let me tell you a story about him. So, the two departed from the monument. With the Sandaime Hokage recalling Minato's academy and genin days, and Namikaze hanging on to every word. 10 hours later, silence reigned in the observation room which overlooked the interrogation room. Naruto Namikaze rested in the chair closest to the window. He still wore his usual long red vest, but this time had an orange jacket under that and blue long pants. Anko Mitarashi was wearing a black trench coat, different from her usual tan trench coat. Everything else she wore was the same. She stood behind the seated Jounin. Sarutobi was present as well, concerned what happened to his missing Anbu. The Sandaime Hokage was flanked by his personal Anbu guard, Monkey. The man, Sparrow, sat in a wooden chair inside the darkened room. Sparrow's partner, Wolf, was in an isolated cell in another wing of the torture and interrogations department awaiting his return. Sparrow's surroundings were covered in seals, and the room itself was bathed in low-intensity green light. This Jounin is not going anywhere, not with the amount of guards in the building, Namikaze thought as he observed the man with a smug satisfaction. The Jounin was waiting. He wanted to watch the man break, start screaming and begging for mercy. Being assaulted and nearly murdered put Namikaze in a bad mood. However, this guy had forced him to break one of his vows, to never use one of those jutsu ever again. This made him absolutely livid, and only his Anbu poker face hid that. By those jutsu, he was referring to Suiton, Hebitama no Jutsu. Namikaze and Orochimaru had worked together to create a jutsu for Namikaze's use. In conjunction, he also worked on another jutsu as well, an even more powerful one, but he couldn't break the vow on that jutsu even if he wanted to. His right hand flexed with a phantom pain to it as memories of the ceiling came back. Namikaze chuckled, Sandaime-sama, you willing to bet on this one? Bet you he's one of Orochimaru's. The Sandaime chuckled and said, I've heard about your luck in gambling. I'll pass on it, thanks. Anko, however, took that bet, placing 1,000 ryu on them being Orochimaru's. Hokage-sama. Look at Sparrow's mouth, Monkey screeched as he ran for the doorway. All the heads in the room turned to the prisoner. Blood streamed from his closed mouth. Namikaze shot up from his chair, sending it flying backward several feet. The Jounin was in shock as he whispered, no. No, damn no. He turned to the door and shouted, Anko. We need to get to Wolf before he does the same thing. Namikaze swept through the door and down the hall at a fast sprint. Anko followed in his wake. Both Jounin arrived at the cell block in 30 seconds. The door opened and sure enough, Wolf was resting in a pool of his own blood. The rest of the prisoners backed away from the cells as Anko came in. Namikaze opened the cell door and moved to his side. His fingers made contact with the skin, but it was cold and lacking a pulse. His fingers started trembling as they retreated from the man's cold corpse. A little bit of indignation seeped into his voice, scum's dead. He lost his anger and slammed his fist into the concrete wall, damn it. He's been dead for several hours. His teammate is probably the same. He slammed his fist into the concrete again and again in frustration. The fourth attempt, however, was stopped by a firm grip. Anko's voice broke through the Jounin's clouded mind, don't take it out on the wall. It didn't do anything. Besides, it's a bit early to conclude Sparrow's death. Namikaze stopped resisting Anko's grip. By the end of the day, medics managed to stabilize Sparrow, but warned it would be unwise to have the man awake. He might try that again. Instead, the task was appointed to Inoichi. The Yamanaka clan leader was also an expert interrogator, but with his clan jutsu, he could break into the man's mind and extract the information needed without the target being awake. Namikaze abandoned his desire for payback. Instead, he sought out Team 7 again and continued helping them train. For days later, Namikaze was resting on the roof of his apartment, twirling a kunai on his fingers. A chunin with several bandages covering his eyes appeared crouching before the Jounin. Excuse me, Namikaze-san. The Sandaime has summoned you immediately. I've been ordered to escort you to the Hokage Tower. Namikaze kept twirling his kunai in his fingers. Neither person moved for several moments, though Namikaze closed his eyes for a moment. A minute passed, and the Jounin opened them again and mused, why would the Hokage send a torture and interrogations underling to bring me before the Hokage? Do you know, overtake? 1. The Jounin stopped twirling the kunai and began rising. Surprised, the Chunin sputtered a bit to come up with an answer. A smile spread across Namikaze's face as he raised his hand to cut him off. Don't worry. Here's not a good place for it, no doubt. Naruto watched closely as the target began moving again. He and his two teammates raced behind some trees to keep up. The voices on the radio sounded off. This is Sasuke, I'm at point B. This is Sakura, I'm at point C. Naruto was slightly behind the rest as they tried encircling the target. Finally in position, the genin pressed the mic button. This is Naruto, I'm at point A. The radio crackled, you're slow Naruto. That was Kakashi. Naruto's eyes were still trained on the little furball. He was on an overhead branch right above the daimyo's cat. Sasuke had its southeast flank covered, Sakura the north and Kakashi the southwest. Kakashi's electrical voice sounded, all right. Naruto, now. Just as planned, Naruto jumped out of the tree right over the cat and scooped him up. Sasuke and Sakura moved in as well. Sasuke's eye started twitching as he muttered, yeah, that's the cat. Kakashi, there is a red ribbon on the right ear. All right. Mission complete. The blonde-haired genin, however, regretted being the point man for the mission. The cat slashed and swiped at Naruto, squirming to get free. Naruto shouted, isn't there a better mission than this? The wooden hallway was lined with pictures and paintings of previous genin, chunin and jounin in the Hokage tower. Namikaze smirked and thought, got to admit, this Konoha is much more respectful of the past ninja. In Namikaze's world, the jounin would walk down its barren hallways. They were dimly lit, much in the same way the ANBU headquarters hallways were, and terrifying for anyone to travel down. However, Sarutobi wanted a more welcoming atmosphere than the snake Sannin. The double doors opened, and there before him Sarutobi sat with his advisors and Irika. Furthermore, Inoichi was sitting off to the side along the wall. The interrogator rose and greeted Namikaze. Sarutobi cleared his throat and the meeting began. Namikaze, I've brought you here because I thought you might want to hear Inoichi's findings. Inoichi, if you would. Inoichi nodded, thank you Sandaime-sama. Over the last couple days, I've managed to glean several useful pieces of information from the mind of our ANBU guest. The first thing we discovered was his responsibility for the deaths of the real wolf and sparrow. Sarutobi lowered his head in a show of respect for his fallen underlings. They would be sadly missed. Namikaze's hand clenched tighter than before, but then relaxed. Inoichi continued after a second pause, we tried to determine who had sent them on their mission, but prior to arriving in the village, both users performed a seal on their memories. Sandaime-sama, I haven't seen this sort of seal since the IWA Konoha War. The old man's head rose. He remembered the days of the IWA War. IWA attempted numerous times to infiltrate the village with sleeper agents. A couple times, they almost succeeded, but managed to stop them. They had cracked the first set of memory seals used on the agents, but new seals were created. It had been 14 years since the IWA war ended. Sarutobi replied, does that mean that Iwagakure is involved somehow? Inoichi shook his head, it's truly hard to say at this point. For all we know, someone could have obtained some IWA sealing arts, or created it themselves. We'll need someone with sealing knowledge, probably you or Rat, Sarutobi-sama. You're the next best after your student, Jiraiya-sama. Namikaze's mind drifted off at that name. Back in his Konoha, there was a legend about Jiraiya. In the Valley of the End, two legends fought for the future of Konoha. Of course, the two who fought were Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju, Shodai Hokage. There was a second legend, however, about the two surviving Sannin as well involving the valley. Orochimaru and Jiraiya, the Toad Sannin, battled to the death. Orochimaru was severely injured in the battle, but ultimately won. Orochimaru claimed that it happened, and he was indeed critically injured around that time. However, Jiraiya's remains were never found. Namikaze mused for a second, and came up with a plausible answer. Orochimaru might have used the Mangekyo Sharingan to finish off Jiraiya. However, if that's true, then could it be possible that there are others from my world here as well? Probably not, but the possibility. His musings were ended abruptly when Inoichi continued his report. Anyway, we cannot get any further into the unknown's mind. We've determined the man's name is Ichikawa Ni, a missing ninja from Kyumo. He was charged with attempted murder of his sister, Yujito Ni. He's been running from Hunter Nin for 11 years. A dozen Hunter Nin have been lost trying to take down this guy. 2 years back, he vanished off the grid. Namikaze muttered, "Guess I lost that bet." Inoichi passed the bingo book entry to Sarutobi first. The book was examined by everyone present, and ended up in the hands of Namikaze. The blonde jounin scanned the info briefly and handed it back to the interrogator. Inoichi pocketed the book and continued on. Anyway, the second, Wolf, is a no-name. We don't have the slightest clue where he came from. There's no headband, bingo book entry, or anything to go on. He could be on the book's no face section, but we can't say for certain. In fact, we may never know who he is. The medical analysts will be able to tell you more in a couple days, but I'm not optimistic. The mind reader hesitated for a second, and then commented, "Namikaze-san, you might want to read this as well." The Yamanaka clan leader slid another book out of his bag and handed it to Namikaze. The jounin opened it to the marked page. It read, Namikaze, Tokubetsu jounin of Konoha known relatives, Minato Namikaze, the yellow fash of Konoha and user of the Hiroshin no Jutsu, wanted, 100 million Ryunon techniques, unknown teleportation jutsu, Kage Bunshin, unknown a rank wind technique. The report concluded with Sarutobi reassuring Inoichi did a fine work and then dismissed him. The instant the doors slid shut, Sarutobi spoke up, Namikaze, what do you know about the Iwa Konoha War? Namikaze recounted all that he knew, taught to him by Kakashi. As a younger boy, Naruto was Naruto, and he failed to pay any attention in history class. Though to be fair, the teachers did sabotage the once genin scores through special tests with exceedingly more difficult questions than his classmates. Kakashi told him stories of his team during the war, how Obito had died, Minato had single-handedly turned the tide of the war, and the brutal battles as Sharingan Kakashi with his medical teammate, Natsuki. Those times spent listening to those stories were the best. Often, they would take place around the Konoha monument. Smoke filtered out of the Hokage's pipe as he listened. There were a few details off, but mostly correct. For example, Orochimaru didn't participate in Minato's legendary battle, and Natsuki's name in this universe was Rin. Sarutobi nodded at the end and replied. Minato had made several enemies of Iwa. Now that those enemies have discovered your existence, I want you to be careful. Sarutobi flipped over his long pipe, letting the tobacco ash hit the floor and put in some more. The jounin nodded solemnly. Iwa would want his head in revenge for the humiliating defeat inflicted by his father. Other ninja would want his head to make a name for him or herself. Not a good place to be. Suddenly, he tasted the sickening stench of snakes in his nose. Namikaze smirked, because Orochimaru wouldn't be allowed within 50 miles of this place. Hello Anka-kan. Ready for a mission today? Enko's hand landed on the jounin's shoulder, and he shuddered. The woman had managed to get so close to him without him sensing a thing, other than her smell. Been a couple days, pervert. Let's begin. Old man, our probation ended at midnight last night. Sarutobi strolled around the table and took a seat. Several scrolls were removed from the hidden cabinet below and lay before the two of them. Red scrolls were rank missions, blue brank, yellow crank and green were drank. The two took to the scrolls and began searching their contents. The wheels of fate began turning as Namikaze picked up one red scroll. It unfurled in his hands, and the first thing he saw caused his jaw to drop. Namikaze's mind went blank as he read the information on the scroll. The second time through was exactly the same as the first. His mind couldn't comprehend and he reasoned, this has to be a joke. No way this can be true. Anko saw the shock on his face and snatched the scroll from the blonde's hands. Namikaze muttered, Sarutobi, is that your idea of a joke? Surely this mission can't exist. Anko read the scroll, mission, assassination of one Gato, the same Gato of Gato Transports. Everything seems in order. It appears a rival businessman wants this man eliminated. He had been encroaching on his business area, threatening customers and even killing civilians. Furthermore, there is reason to believe there are drug shipments being controlled by the target. Wow, we might face several ninjas under his command. Sounds interesting. We'll take it, old man Hokage. Sarutobi cleared his throat before replying, very well, but we have no current idea of his location. Normally, we'd give this to hunter ninjas, but all active hunters are on missions right now. Namikaze's shocked expression disappeared, and an evil smile replaced it. Don't worry, Hokage-sama. I have a fairly good idea where he is right now. The Hokage was slightly unnerved. The room's temperature seemed to drop a couple degrees. There was something about Namikaze that suddenly appeared, off somehow. He dismissed the thought though and sent the two off. Naruto walked down the hallway, carrying the feral cat. The moment they stepped into the Hokage tower, the cat seemed to redouble its efforts to escape. 5 minutes later, the cat's worst nightmare was realized as the daimyo's wife smothered it with affection. The genin could only smirk. That's right, cat. Harder, lady, squeeze that furball harder. I want to see it explode, then I can have the last laugh. Naruto smirked at the cat and started praying. 2 minutes later, the genin frowned as the cat somehow managed to survive long enough to leave in noblewoman's arms. It was only a small consolation that the cat's torture would probably last forever. Once again, the wheels of fate turned as Naruto and his team accepted a mission escorting a drunkard old man who needed an escort to the land of waves. The massive gates of Konoha were open wide for all who traveled both in and out of Konoha. The walls surrounding the village were over 5 feet thick and laced with blood seals. Deep under the city, a team of guardians were constantly maintaining the genjutsu that detected all who entered the village. Namikaze couldn't help but be impressed every time he saw the incredible defenses. In Namikaze's old world, the walls had been penetrated only 3 times, during the Kyubi attack, the Suna/Kusa War, and Pain's assault on Konoha. A loud smack echoed down the line of buildings. Anko slapped Namikaze's head. Idiot, spouted Anko, did you even hear what I said? How could you possibly know where Gato is? Namikaze chuckled darkly, let's just say I will know where he is about a week or 2 from now, who will be guarding him and what ninjas we will face, should we choose to follow that path. Anko looked intrigued, but inwardly skeptical. Do tell, Namikaze-kun. The jounin opened his mouth to speak, but paused and stared at her in surprise. She chuckled lightly and nodded her head. Namikaze said, we'll wait for Kakashi and his team, as we'll be heading in roughly the same direction. Gato is located in the land of waves. Team 7 should be receiving their mission right about now for an escort there. Once we all arrive, our teams will separate, and will hunt Gato down like the dog he is. 40 minutes later, the 2 jounin strode up to Team 7. The moment Anko could be seen, Naruto and Sakura flinched, while Sasuke took up a fighting stance. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen, probably wishing farewell to Obito and Minato. Tazuna was sitting against the village walls, gulping down another bottle of sake. Namikaze walked over and said, so, you're being escorted to Wave accompanied by those guys? The old man nodded warily and said, yeah, can't believe I got a bunch of brats and a lazy bastard like that. I tell ya, Konoha standards for their ninjas are dropping. Namikaze, being such a ninja from Konoha, decided a bit of petty revenge is in order, so, how's Gato doing? Tazuna's eyes widened and he sprayed the contents out of his mouth all over the jounin. Namikaze blinked and walked away. Enko, meanwhile, was bent over, laughing so hard. The blonde jounin just nodded solemnly at the woman and muttered, "I'll remember this." "Yeah, haha, whatever. Brat. So, you've confirmed it?" Namikaze nodded, "Yeah, it's as I thought. Gato is in wave." Enko's face became serious. She looked between Team 7, Tazuna and Namikaze, and hissed at whisper level, "Brat, you do realize the bastard's lying about Kakashi's mission? It can't be a crank mission, ours is an A rank. I enjoy a good bloodbath every now and then, but not when it's my fellow Konoha ninja that are being slaughtered." Enko looked incredulously at the other jounin. Namikaze gave her a look that said, "And? So what?" At this, a piece of the puzzle fell into place. Namikaze liked Team 7, and his attitude meant only one thing: you knew all along? Namikaze just smirked. "This mission is quite possibly the most important mission in my younger self's life." Tazuna stumbled over to the two jounin and asked cautiously, "What do you know?" Namikaze gave an innocent smile, "No." "Know what?" "We've been ordered to assassinate Gato. Rumor in the shadows is Gato is in waves right now. I just owe him a little favor for having a good friend of mine killed. Now get lost, old drunkard." Tazuna backed away slowly, as if the two would kill him in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, loud footsteps and pages turning could be heard a few feet away. Kakashi had finally arrived. "Yo. Sorry I'm late, but I had trouble packing my stuff." No one was in the mood to call Kakashi a liar. The book slapped shut and was put in the jounin's pack. He was slightly surprised to see Namikaze and Enko present. "What are the two of you doing here? I heard that Hokage had already dispatched our favorite two-man team on an A-rank mission." He was somewhat jovial in how he spoke. Enko showed some teeth as she replied, "Our target is suspected to be in wave. We ran across the little brat here and decided to travel together. Once we arrive, we'll head our separate ways." Naruto flinched as Enko looked his way hungrily. Namikaze chuckled, "Down Enko. She's right, Kakashi. Think of it as extra protection. No bandits will dare attack such a large group." Kakashi looked oddly at Namikaze, and then nodded. He looked to the sky and smelled the air. There was a slight northwestern breeze, but no humidity. There was not a cloud in sight, a perfect day for traveling. Naruto Uzumaki was excited, as this was the first time he traveled outside the village. An escort mission, even if it was an old drunk, was still something new and exciting. Like a kid, he scanned the area outside the village gates for any bandits. His whole body shook in anticipation. Sakura's eye was twitching as she gave in to her desire to smack some sense into Naruto. She screeched, "This is not a field trip, so take it seriously, Naruto." Naruto whined, "Sakuraken. That hurt. Then stop acting like a kid." Sasuke finished checking the supplies in his backpack, and slung it over his shoulders. Tazuna would have been annoyed at Naruto's attitude, but was concerned with the blonde jounin and his partner. Kakashi sensed Tazuna's fear, which was somewhat odd, but filed it away for future investigation. It would be a couple days' trip to the land of waves, after all. Namikaze's troubles make fun with torture and interrogations. Several hours later, Team 7 and Team Namikaze had set up camp at a nearby river a mile from the road. Namikaze was filling up his water jug while Enko sat sharpening her knives. Enko was just idly watching the man while they rested up, and then asked, "Say, I heard that you were once in the torture and interrogation section of the ANBU." Namikaze pulled the jug out of the water and put a cork on top. The ninja gave a rueful grin and said, "Yeah. It was one of my favorite memories of my Konoha. Ibiki became a close friend of mine during that time. He often sent me the most dangerous, hard-to-crack criminals of them all." Enko whistled. "Wow, you were that good, huh?" Namikaze blushed a bit. "Well, no, not quite." He filled up another jug as he reminisced. "You see, they sent me the ones Ibiki couldn't crack. Most were some of the really nasty cases. I remember a couple of them. They sent me Rado, one of the 7 swordsmen, after they captured him near the Kyumo border, Oki, Nagar, and Hokusen, of the Wandering Ninja. Oh, and Jitai of the Land of Demons, too." The Jounin got goosebumps as he remembered fondly. "Yeah, he was especially fun. You see, they had a special name for me in the division, the sadistic god of death. I was so bad at keeping my marks alive early on in the game, that I managed to earn myself a reputation. When my later marks came, they cracked upon arrival because my information had spread outwards to so many different villages. Those who didn't wish they'd died." Enko stared at the ninja with a disbelieving look. Namikaze just smiled back and said, "I'll give you an example of how I work later, if Ibiki will allow me." The ninja just stood and walked back to the camp, whistling a death march. All across the nations, several missing ninja and criminals felt like someone had just stabbed them in the gut. The moment light struck the tent, Namikaze's eyes shot open and scanned his immediate area. That evening, Kakashi, Namikaze, and Enko alternated the watch. His shadow clones maintained the barrier, ensuring there was no surprise attack. It would be about an hour before his reserves would be full again. Namikaze thought for a second and then paled. It had been a couple days since they departed the village, and there should have been an ambush. The village wasn't too far away when Team 7 had engaged 2 Mizu ninja. That could only mean one thing: his presence, Enko's or both their presences had changed the whole mission somehow. That very thought scared Namikaze. He pulled out a kunai and started sharpening it. Okay, what to do now? It's obvious Gato still wants Tazuna dead. The old man's reaction to the name confirmed that. But what could have changed? Well, we'll see if Zabuza still engages us at the lake. If so, we'll still be on the right timeline, just a slight deviation then. He was doused in icy water. The Jounin's eyes started twitching in irritation. Hissing laughter broke out behind him, eliminating all the suspects but one. Sure enough, the blonde Jounin turned in time to see his partner pointing at him, slapping her knees and having the time of her life. He muttered, "I'll give you a 3-second head start." Enko didn't hear what he said, but knew he said something. She stopped laughing when bloodlust started radiating off him. She smirked and retorted, "All right. You want to go at it, make the first move, brat." Namikaze pulled out a senbon out of a metal tube he kept in his leg pouch. The senbon was dripping with the nerve agent that had knocked her unconscious for 8 hours. Her face paled considerably, as she backed up. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Oh, I would." Enko shined in a second, with Namikaze hot on her heels. Several hours had passed, and the weather was turning humid. It could only mean that they were getting close to the ocean and Wave. At a nearby ocean town, Tazuna contacted a friend from Wave who arranged a boat transport to his hometown, and the location of the bridge. The entire company was enjoying some ramen from a nearby store, but Namikaze didn't eat any. Kakashi noticed this, and deduced that he was struggling with something. The blonde Jounin's face was scrunched up, like he was arguing with himself, and then relaxed into the lines of resignation. Namikaze sighed, "All right Tazuna. This has gone on long enough." Tazuna's face seemed to pale a bit. He said, "Huh? What are you getting at?" "I mean that I've let this go long enough. Why don't you tell the truth for once? This is no ordinary escort mission. Explain how Gato fits into this mission, or I'll call their mission off." Namikaze didn't have the authority to do so, but knew Kakashi did and was suspicious of both missions to begin with. Tazuna looked at the copy ninja who stared the old man down. His shoulders slumped in defeat. All right. You're right. The truth is there is a powerful man out for my life. His name is Gato. Kakashi's eye widened in surprise. Gato? Of Gato Transport, he's one of the richest men in the world. Tazuna nodded. That's right. But in the shadows, he also sells contraband and drugs using thugs and ninja. He uses his business tactics to take over countries and businesses. He set his sights on Wave about a year ago. He'll kill anyone who gets in his way. However, there is one thing that he fears, the completion of my bridge. Completing the bridge will break his hold on Wave, bringing new commerce and trade. To prevent the completion of the bridge, he's going to try to kill me, no doubt. Namikaze finally ordered some ramen and wolfed it down in record time. The rest of the group turned to look at him. Tazuna asked, but how did you know Gato was in Wave? And furthermore, how did you know that I was heading to Wave? The Jounin spoke quietly. I've been to Wave once. Gato used a close friend of mine for his own nefarious deeds, leading to my friend's death. I heard that he didn't complete his takeover of Wave, and I've been preparing to kill him since that date. Another complete lie, one only caught by Kakashi, who knew the truth, and Sasuke. Sasuke took measure of the man, filing it away for consideration at a later time. Naruto and Sakura looked sadly at the blonde-haired Jounin. Kakashi spoke sternly. Tazuna-san, you've lied about the scope of the mission. This is grounds for immediate dismissal. Why did you lie? Tazuna looked ashamed, because the land of Waves is a small and impoverished nation. Even our nobles are very poor. The bridge is our last hope. With it, we can revive our nation with the money from trade. If you end this mission, I will be killed within an hour of arrival, and our hope with me. He shrugged, but, don't feel bad about it. Of course my sweet little grandson will be upset. He'll cry for his grandpa, grandpa. Grandpa. Oh, and my daughter will denounce the ninja of the Konoha, blaming them forever for the death of her father and living her life in sorrow. But, don't worry about it at all. Enko yawned at his story and Namikaze knew what was going to happen anyway. Team 7 agreed to protect Tazuna from Gato. The old man looked at Namikaze and Enko. Enko threw one of her chopsticks, which stuck into the wood. She said, yeah sure whatever old man. Our mission is to kill Gato anyway, so your survival is of some importance to us. Just think of yourself as bait, so don't worry about it. Kakashi and Namikaze's sweat dropped, while Naruto and Tazuna shivered at her attitude. Sakura looked horrified, while Sasuke just sort of ignored what was going on. The boat trip across the channel was slow going, but no enemy ninja ambushed them on the water. Once they arrived in Wave's port town, the boatman apologized and left, fearing for his life for helping Tazuna. All of them walked down the road at nice pace. Kakashi moved next to Namikaze and whispered, Namikaze-kun, what are we looking at? Namikaze closed his eyes and whispered back, hard to say senpai, we were supposed to be ambushed between Konoha and the boat town by the demon brothers. Next, we should be ambushed by Zabuza Momochi. Kakashi's eye widened once again in surprise. Zabuza was an rank missing ninja in the bingo books. He attempted a coup d'état a while ago, but failed horribly, fleeing with what followers he had, which were reputed to be a boy and the demon brothers. Namikaze nudged his fellow Jounin in the ribs and said ominously, be ready for anything. A good distance further, Kakashi, Enko, Naruto and Namikaze all detected something. Naruto and Enko threw kunai in its general direction. Behind some bushes, one kunai had narrowly missed a snow rabbit, while the second had skewered it between the eyes. Namikaze's mouth curled into a smile. Time was on track once again. However, something else dampened his mood. Naruto hugged the rabbit and almost cried. However, he was standing in a puddle. He thought, there was no puddle there last time. Furthermore, there hasn't been any rain in the nearby region for a couple days, oh no. Long chains rose out of the water around Naruto. Anko reacted fastest of all. She kicked Naruto out of the chains an instant before they tore at where he just stood. Get down, Kakashi's voice shouted as he ducked. Namikaze, however, was caught flat-footed. He turned and saw a sword flying right at him. He drew his blade, but didn't channel chakra in time. The two blades collided. Namikaze managed to hold the attack off for a millisecond before the strain would shatter his weapon. However, that millisecond was just enough, as he used the Kawarimi to escape without injury. Zabuza's sword continued on, slamming into the tree several feet away. Zabuza appeared on the hilt of his blade. His eyes shifted from Kakashi to Namikaze to Anko, taking them each in stride. His deep voice made Namikaze's hands tremble with excitement. Kakashi of the Sharingan I and Konoha's Yamakagashi, 2, Anko Mitarashi. And a third jounin I've never heard of before. The genin looked at Kakashi in expectancy. The silver-haired jounin reached up and touched his forehead protector. Several Sanban were in Anko's hands. The demon brothers exited the puddle and took up a fighting stance. Kakashi spoke up, well, Zabuza Momochi, the demon of Mizugakure. Sorry Kakashi, but I'm going to demand you hand over the bridge builder. Namikaze spoke dismissively, I think not. How about you go away and take your flunkies with you? The demon brothers bristled, realizing just who would be their first target. Kakashi pulled up his protector, revealing his Sharingan. A strong breeze blew through the area, rustling the leaves as the jounin began releasing chakra. Sasuke explained what the Sharingan was to Naruto. Namikaze spoke afterwards, cutting off Zabuza before he had a chance to respond. Kakashi can copy any jutsu he sees with that eye, giving him the title, the man who copied over 1,000 jutsu. You got it right, said Zabuza. When I was in the ANBU Black Ops, he was listed in the bingo book under that description. A deep mist formed in the area. Kakashi said, I'll deal with Zabuza. Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, Manji formation, protect Tazuna with your lives. Anko and Namikaze, deal with the demon brothers. Anko started things off, throwing several Sanban, which the demon brothers dodged. They moved in a cross pattern, moving in to engage the two Tokubetsu jounin. Several snakes ejected themselves from the sleeves at both enemies. They all slammed into the ground, missing their targets. The demon brothers were within a few feet from Namikaze when the blonde jounin smirked. The chain started encircling the jounin, but he jumped out of them easily. His blade slammed through one of the rings in the chains and into the softened dirt. He pushed the blade into the ground until it reached the hilt, and did a handstand on the butt of the sword. The demon brothers attempted to break free, but only moved it an inch. Namikaze pushed off, letting two shurikens slide down his sleeves into his hands, which were sent flying. Both weapons sliced their carotid arteries. They grabbed at their throats in a futile effort to stem the tide of blood. Anko finished up, by striking the backs of their necks, causing them to collapse. Without medical assistance, they would be dead within minutes. By the time the two finished up, Kakashi had been caught into the water prison, and a water clone was staring down the three genin. Naruto was laying on the ground. He backed away and almost began running. Then, Anko's voice cut through the fog, You running away, little brat? You've dealt with worse than this under my care. Naruto stopped in his tracks. Flashback: Naruto lay in the ground. Several kunai and sanban were jutting out of various parts of his body. Sasuke was several feet away, similarly injured. Sakura, meanwhile, tried to focus on practicing her genjutsu. A hard feat with both her teammates being used for pincushions. Anko waved her objections off, citing it as a lesson in concentration, ignoring her teammates' injuries in order to gain the upper hand in the battle. Naruto was crawling backwards away from Anko, and she just kept walking after him. Anko smirked, "Is that all you've got, brat? You're nothing but a coward, a scared baby, so run away. But remember this, there are people several times better and scarier than me out there. What would you do if it was your precious Irika you talk so much about at my mercy?" Naruto stopped in his tracks and began pulling out all the weapons. Blood dripped down from each wound. He glared at the snake woman and shouted, "Starting today, I'll never run away, no matter what. Upon these wounds, I vow never to go back on my word or run away again. I'll protect those I love most, even if it costs me my life. Come on, snake team." Anko looked surprised at the kid and started laughing. Sasuke muttered, "Idiot." She pulled herself together and said, "Sounds interesting, brat. I'll hold you to that. The day you back down from it, I'll kill you myself. Now you better get to the hospital and get those wounds looked at. You might die of blood loss if you don't." And flashback Namikaze was confused at her remark. However, he decided that now was not the best time to think about it. The short katana was extracted from the dirt, but then he frowned. The katana had a massive crack in the blade. He thought back, and reasoned it must have happened when Zabuza's blade made contact with his. It would be useless to him as it was. Zabuza shouted, "Don't move, either one of you. One false move and Kakashi dies." Namikaze tensed, and then relaxed a second later, "Sure. We'll let the genin deal with it. Right, Naruto?" "Sasuke?" Naruto nodded and threw himself into a shadow clone rush. Zabuza's sword made mincemeat of each of them. Sasuke followed up with 2 wind shuriken. It was a repeat of history as Naruto was the second shuriken. He got the drop on Zabuza and threw a kunai. The kunai whistled through the air, on a direct line towards the missing nin. The water prison fell apart as the blade narrowly missed Zabuza, forcing him to release it. However, the Jounin retaliated faster than Kakashi could react as he threw the windmill shuriken at Naruto. Water rose into the air and formed a hissing snake, which molded into Namikaze between the shuriken and the genin. His left hand grabbed it out of the air. Zabuza's eyes widened in surprise, and his head turned just in time to see Namikaze's shadow clone burst into smoke. Kakashi shunshined away from Zabuza, his chakra nearly gone. Namikaze began spinning the windmill shuriken in his hand as he began mocking Zabuza. "Well, Zabuza, pretty impressive for a bunch of kids. I don't think I could have done better myself." Zabuza's eyes narrowed. "Tch, you got lucky, brat. I let my guard down for a second, and I accidentally released the technique," Zabuza shouted, his voice a bit too shrilly. Anko's voice sounded, "It wasn't an accident, you had to let go." "Well, demon of the mist, what will you do now, outnumbered, 3 jounin to 1? Are you ready to die?" The snake jounin let a predator's smile creep onto her face. Her tongue rolled over the bladed edge of a kunai. A shiver flew up Zabuza's back, along with the rest of Team 7. Namikaze just smiled. Zabuza's hands went into a flurry of activity, and water chakra rippled off the jounin through the water. Namikaze was quick on the uptake, as he finished his jutsu faster, Suetun, Hebitama no Jutsu. 3 snakes formed out of water and shot towards Zabuza. The missing nin seemed to grin as his last hand sign formed. A more massive water attack shot through the air straight through the snakes and right at Namikaze. The snakes were totally engulfed, but not stopped in the slightest. They speared through the water-based attack and continued on to Zabuza. Namikaze was engulfed in Zabuza's counterattack and dragged underwater by the water dragon. The missing nin shunshined right, landing several feet away, right into a wave of Sanban, kunai, and shuriken. His sword sliced through the air, blocking each attack. However, the defense left him open from behind, where Anko appeared and sent a flying kick at his midsection. The Jounin brought his sword around in a reverse arc, severing Anko's leg from her body. However, she turned into smoke, and a kick hit him from behind. Anko landed where Zabuza was just standing and continued forward, engaging him in a furious blitz of taijutsu. Namikaze, however, was battling for his life against a fully formed water dragon. He first thought the jutsu was Suiton, Suryuten no Jutsu, water. Release, water dragon bullet technique, but it was slightly different. He planned on disrupting it with his defense technique, Futon, Gufu Garanda no Jutsu, wind release, typhoon void technique, but the jutsu reformed unlike other water dragon jutsu. When it dragged him underwater, the dragon changed to a winged dragon. 3. He used chakra-charged punches attempting to disrupt the technique, but it just didn't finish it off. The water dragon kept slashing at the Jounin, who kept keeping the attacks at bay with his taijutsu. However, he was extremely weakened in water and could only hold out for so long. One attack struck, sending the Jounin deep into the lake's depth. The water dragon's eyes glowed white as it sensed the Jounin's faltering. It sped towards the Jounin, claws out in front with the purpose of skewering Namikaze. He grabbed his sword scabbard and drew the weapon. A scythe of wind chakra sliced through the water towards the dragon. The attack struck with impressive force, but the dragon just reformed and prepared to move again. Namikaze brought his sword around for a second attack, until he heard a sickening chink. The damaged blade broke off, and began falling towards the lake floor. The dragon narrowly missed Namikaze, sending the stunned Jounin several feet away. He didn't move as he slowly fell towards the ocean floor after his broken blade. Images swarmed through his mind. He found himself once again inside the sewers of his mind. However, he was nowhere near the fox. A long-lost image floated to the forefront. Flashback: Naruto opened the door to his apartment, to suddenly be bombarded with shouts of surprise. Shock and joy played across his face as his eyes passed over the people present: Hinata, Sasuke, Sakura, Iruka, Kakashi, Shikamaru, Shikaku Nara, Kurenai, Guy, Lee, Niji, and Kabuto. 4. His precious people were here to celebrate his promotion to Jounin and commission as an ANBU operative. He was at a complete loss for words. Everyone, wow. His mouth curled into a nice smile. Sasuke walked up to his friend and said, "Don't let it go to your head, Dobe. Remember, I still beat you there first. Never thought you'd get here, but that's what Orochimaru's training you for." There was no malice behind his words. The Uchiha still wanted revenge against Itachi, but he was willing to wait and do it with his teammates. Naruto's smile transformed into a smirk. "I won't team. So, what did you get me?" Greedy as always. He picked up a long box and threw it at the newly minted blonde Jounin. Naruto tore at the box, and everyone watched in suspense. The wrapping paper was gone in seconds, and the top opened. A black scabbard small katana slid out of the box. Kakashi said, "Sasuke, I haven't been ANBU in quite a while, but they typically give their new recruits a katana. It is a fine gift, but," Sasuke shrugged, "this sword is special." The blade was tempered in the same chakra-absorbing material Asuma's blades were made out of. It can absorb your natural chakra. It was once my father's, and now I pass it on to you. Naruto looked up at his friend. Tears were sliding down his cheeks. He sniffed and said, "Thank you. Don't you sniff worry. I'll take good care of it, that's a promise, and I never go back on my word." End flashback. Namikaze had failed. Once again he failed one of his precious people. Furthermore, he had broken one of his promises. Self-loathing swirled through his head, when another voice rose, "No. No. It wasn't you. It was that demon, Zabuza." Namikaze's own thoughts rose, affirming the voice's statement. Controlled anger took over. He knew that if he didn't control it, the seal would weaken. However, he wouldn't hesitate in how he used his own chakra. Namikaze's blue eyes shot open. A sinister smile formed on his face as he formed several hand signs that he had sealed off months ago. Mad thoughts swirled through his head. You broke my blade. Now, you die. His final hand sign fell into place, and the jutsu was complete. Anko kept striking out at the missing ninja on top of water. She was just about to use her trump card when the lake virtually exploded. Wind chakra tore through the water in several places, opening holes that reached to the bottom of the lake bed. Small twisters sucked water up in waterspouts as they tore in all directions. Zabuza was nearly engulfed in the attack. Kakashi held up his hands to keep the water from his face. Then, the weird jutsu dissipated as fast as it formed. Zabuza looked around, wondering what the hell just happened. Anko, content to believe that it was her partner somehow, took advantage of the missing nin's dropped guard. She rushed him, slamming him across the water to the ground. She quickly injected him with a heavy sedative, saying, "This should hold you for your trip back to Wave. They demanded more money for your live return, and now they'll get you." Suddenly, the familiar sound of metal whistling through air could be heard. Anko leapt backwards with a kunai in her hand and eyes scanning for the weapons or attackers. However, the meaty thump could be heard from where she just was. She turned to see a couple senbon sticking out of Zabuza's neck. "I must thank you," a voice sounded, "you've finally given me the chance to overtake and eliminate my target." Zabuza was a hard man to catch. Anko turned to a tree, and snarled at the Mizu ninja. He was just a boy, but apparently very skilled to have caused a killing blow with senbon. It was impressive to say the least. The boy leapt down and picked up the missing ninja. Naruto walked towards the boy with the intent of fighting him, but Kakashi reprimanded him. Anko's eyes narrowed. Something's not right. Don't the hunter ninja typically destroy the body on sight? Haku, meanwhile, sensed that his cover was about to break, so he shined away as quickly as he could. In the middle of the lake, Namikaze floated to the top, mostly drained of chakra. He didn't even remember most of what happened. What he did remember was using his second jutsu to protect himself against the water dragon. If he could, he would have beat his head against the nearest tree. Instead, he settled for dragging himself to shore. Namikaze was in no mood for it when Anko's cocky voice could be heard. "Gee, pervert, you certainly went all out. Who were you trying to kill down there, me or Zabuza? And look, you're out of chakra." She chuckled, to which he muttered, "Shut up, team." Yellow sunlight flooded through the open window. Namikaze had his elbow on the window sill, feeling the cool, moist breeze wash over him. His mouth curved into a rare genuine smile, unlike that of the masks he wore every day. He often wore the mask of a boy, enthusiastic about everything and smiled to hide the pain. Other times, he wore a mask of the Anbu captain, bloodthirsty, emotionless and calculating. Neither were him. He was once the enthusiastic boy, but no longer, not since Sakura died, since so many of his friends had died over the years and since his wife had died. However, he still could remember the good times they all had. "I loved mornings like this," Namikaze thought. "I'd wake up just as the light flooded through the window. Outside, Hinata took care of her small garden, and the sun would shine over her shoulders. She'd turn to me, with those pearly white eyes and smile. I'd wave at her and she'd wave at me. Sakura would come over with Lee for breakfast, and we'd all head to the tower for our missions with our respective teams. Sasuke would be waiting for us at the Hokage tower, analyzing reports on the missing nin activities around Konoha, but would stop immediately once we arrived and greet all four of us with a warm smile. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he sighed in contentment at the memory. His thought turned towards Haku. What should he do to make sure his friend didn't die again? Knock. 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 Someone was beating on the door frame. Namikaze's mask went up once again as he rubbed the tear away. It was Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter, whose face came through the sliding wooden doors. Naruto-san, Anko and Kakashi are asking for you downstairs. Namikaze nodded, I'll be down in a minute. He strapped up his jounin vest and the red vest over that. The 2 kunai pouches on each hip were next, and the shuriken pouch after that. Finally, he reached for his sheathed sword, and then stopped. His eyes darkened a bit as anger washed over him. However, he suppressed his anger and set down the broken katana. Downstairs, Kakashi explained his plan to continue where they had left off at the end of the training week. Naruto and Sasuke had finished the tree climbing exercise, and would continue on to water walking. Sakura, as usual, would continue perfecting the jutsu she had recently created. Namikaze explained his plan for infiltrating Gado's organization. Anko loved the plan, but Kakashi seemed dubious. The blonde jounin could only smile in response. Miroku's hand rested on his hidden blade. He sighed as he watched a group of pathetic villagers fight for the smallest scraps of food. Gado's not paying me enough for this, he thought. His mission was to assassinate either one of the ninja that were protecting the bridge builder or the bridge builder himself. He waited around the food stands near the bridge, hoping the old man would walk through the area. It would be soon, no doubt. So, he amused himself in the meantime by tossing a few scraps of food on the ground, causing fights between the starving citizens of Wave. However, a simple-looking blonde guy and dark purple-haired woman broke up the fight, reminding them they were humans and should act as such. Miroku looked at the peacemakers with contempt, and then turned towards the bridge. His eyes widened as he saw a pink-haired girl with a Konoha forehead protector and an old man walking towards the bridge. He pulled out a picture in his possession and smirked. Miroku picked himself up from the side of the road and began moving through the small crowd. The crowds were thick, so he pushed his way through, closed in on the 20 feet. 15 feet. 10, 6. He counted off in his head in anticipation. He had to be close enough for the poison dagger to deal a fatal blow. Finally, he was right behind the 2 of them. Gado's lackey silently unsheathed the dagger and ran it through the old man's back. He grinned in anticipation. The old man groaned in pain, and he thought, easy money. He withdrew his blade, ensuring the maximum damage would be done. Suddenly, the old man and girl exploded into smoke. Miroku shouted, "What the?" He never got the chance to finish the statement, as something slammed into the back of his neck. Darkness engulfed him. Time, unknown, location unknown, the sound of muffled voices could be heard. Miroku's head felt like needles were sticking out of it. His hands were tied behind him and a blindfold covered his eyes. The voices drifted in and out, "Look, we don't, kill him, last one." That voice was a male. What, he thought, what about killing him, are they referring to me? The voices became more and more clear. The second voice spoke up, a female, "Well, even if he doesn't talk, we have the other one. He's expendable." The male voice sighed and replied, "Fine. We'll do it your way this time. If he talks though, let him live." Miroku was uncomfortable and felt completely defenseless as he heard footsteps walk towards him. Something hard slammed into his face, like an open palm. The female voice shouted, "Wake up, maggot." Miroku moaned in pain. The female voice growled, "We're going to ask you some questions. If you tell the truth, you live. If you lie, well, we'll get there next. If you don't answer the questions, we'll kill you. We've already gone through another of your comrades an hour ago." He clammed up, "And this is all that's left." Something meaty and wet slammed into his lap. Miroku felt terror, pure unadulterated terror. These 2 had already killed someone. He felt something wet sliding down his clothes, blood probably, and it scared the crap out of him. He stuttered, "What do you want to know?" He swallowed some bile as it attempted to rise in his throat. The woman's tone turned silky sweet, nothing much. Just the current location of your employer, Gato? Miroku was surprised. However, a new fear rose to eclipse the first. Gato, who's Gato? Suddenly, a searing hot pain shot across his cheek, as something cut deep into his cheek. He yelped in pain for a second, and then clammed up again. The woman's voice returned, clearly incensed, "Don't give me that crap. Gato is your employer. We know you're working for him." That scratch was a freebie warning. The next lie or reluctance to give information will result in loss of limb. The thug was sweating profusely. He cried, "He'll kill me. I'll kill you, too. Now answer the question." Miroku closed his mouth, anticipating a world of pain. The woman chuckled darkly, "So be it." Several hours later, Namikaze sighed as Anko returned from the cave. She had some blood on her body, and she didn't appear happy. The blonde jounin sighed and said, "Didn't give it up, huh?" Anko frowned, but her reply surprised him. "Oh, he gave it up, but it wasn't pretty." She left the rest unsaid. Anko was probably the second best interrogator in Konoha. Ibiki got his information through psychological torture, and Anko got hers through physical torture. Inwardly, he smirked, because she had some skill in psychological torture as well. Setting up the conversation just as Miroku woke up was a stroke of genius, and the hell illusion genjutsu that made Miroku think we were insane. Namikaze briefly wondered if the subject survived her methods and then decided he didn't really care. The man had a small bounty for poisoning a highly respected village head, killing several guards fleeing town, and various other misdeeds. The world was better off without him. Anko walked over to the brook and began cleaning off. Namikaze cleaned off the bloody knives and returned them to his partner. She grinned, "Thanks. It appears that there's a camp a couple miles upstream from the bridge." That was about all he knew. Little Bastard was hired to kill the bridge builder, and that he would meet Gato's contact on the edge of the bridge in a couple hours. Namikaze grabbed at his chin thoughtfully. He smiled at her pleasantly. "So, do we want to grab and bag him, or follow the leader?" Anko shrugged. "I get the feeling the contact doesn't know where Gato is and we know the target isn't at the camp. I think the best plan is to go fishing." Namikaze nodded and handed back the interrogation tools. Anko took them from his hands and slid them into her back pouch. The blood was now rinsed off her trench coat. Kakashi looked all around him. His eyes widened in amazement at the technique before him. Incredible. To create such a grand illusion, and Sakura just graduated not more than a month ago. He lifted his headband from his Sharingan eye. The image became translucent, but the mind still sensed the feel of metal slicing skin through muscle and into his bones. He looked at where the pain appeared, but his shoulder was completely unmarred. The illusion was complete. He held up both hands in a ram sign and shouted, "Kai." Immediately, the pain vanished along with the rest of the technique. Sakura looked expectantly at her teacher. Kakashi looked solemnly at her for a minute, and then his eye turned into a smile. "I think it's almost ready." Sakura's face lit up. Her inner self was cheering loudly, but outer Sakura rushed to where Sasuke and Naruto were trying to walk on water. Kakashi looked at his 3 students. He smirked as he saw 3 other students overlap his own, and a ghostly blonde jounin instructor stand off to the side. Kakashi muttered pleasantly, "Sensei, I see so much of us in all of them." Overlapping Naruto, Obito smiled at Sakura and her success. Sakura was overlapped by Rin, who attempted to get Sasuke's attention and show him her new technique to impress him. Sasuke was overlapped by a young Kakashi, who ignored Sakura/Rin and concentrated on waterwalking. The ghostly blonde jounin looked at Kakashi with his bright blue eyes. His long white coat with red flames on the bottom fluttered as a large breeze flowed through the river area. Naruto/Obito lost his concentration and fell in. Sakura/Rin was splashed with water and she yelled at Naruto, then smiled a bit to herself. Sasuke/young Kakashi looked disinterested at the whole thing, but secretly smirked when his back was turned. Minato Namikaze just chuckled to himself. Minato's apparition looked at Kakashi and smiled at him. Kakashi returned it with one of his own. Then the images faded, leaving only Sasuke, Sakura, Naruto, and himself by the river. Kakashi covered up his Sharingan. Behind the metal plate, tears began streaming down, but only out of Obito's eye. Roughly midnight, bridge, the man with a black cloak was uncomfortable standing around in the open. The entire region would kill him if they knew who he was. Miroku was supposed to report back, but that was 30 minutes ago. He shivered in the humid night air. Every minute, it seemed like something was creeping through the thick fog. He checked his watch again. He breathed a sigh of relief a few seconds later as someone approached him from the fog. "Which direction does the dagger face?" the nervous man asked. The shadow paused for a second, and then replied, "The dagger faces the east." Miroku walked up to the man and whispered, "The bridge builder has yet to be assassinated." The man in the cloak cursed, "Damn, what the hell went wrong?" Miroku sighed, "The Jounin was there this time around. We'll have another go at it tomorrow." The cloaked man grumbled in frustration. He wanted out of Wave as fast as he could. The cloaked man said, "Well, let's head to the warehouse down the river. We'll be staying there tonight." Miroku nodded. Warehouse. The contact tapped on the door several times in varying succession. After a minute of this, the double doors began sliding open. Inside, several armored thugs with samurai weapons watched the new arrivals with interest. Miroku nodded at them and looked around. There were several mats all around and some training grounds. Some people were playing with decks of cards or eating. He looked into the rafters and sure enough, 2 ninja watched the proceedings. A small amount of bloodlust radiated off of each of them. Several bandits approached, asking for an update on the mission. Miroku proceeded with his story, and looked for a resting spot. He slowly made notes of each major support pillar. At each one, Miroku subtly slipped in a powerful paper bomb. The 2 ninja watched him closely. Outside the warehouse, a darkened shadow moved through the brush up to the edge of the building. He slipped out several paper bombs and placed them at various points on the walls. After his finished, he pulled out a small radio and switched it on. A small burst of static came through the otherwise silent radio channel. He pushed the send button twice, signaling it was done. Inside, Miroku pulled out a pipe and proceeded outside for a smoke. However, the 2 ninja landed in front and growled, "Hold it. We've been watching you. You're not Miroku. He neither owns a pipe nor does he smoke. Furthermore, you slipped something inside each of the support pillars." Several bandits began approaching menacingly. Miroku smirked, and then burst into smoke. In his place, a medium-sized woman with a tan trench coat and wire mesh shirt. She smiled and raised her hands, "All right boys, you got me." She batted her eyes at the ninja, who stood completely unfazed. The bandits rushed her, but Enko proved faster, as she peppered them all with a stream of senbon from her shuriken pouch. The 2 ninja were next. Both dodged her attacks with grace as they weaved through the senbon needle storm. Enko smirked, as several snakes shot out of her sleeves. Though the 2 ninja leapt over the attack, the snakes changed directions and homed in on them again. The snakes' heads were lobbed off by the kunai of one of the ninja. The second ninja leapt over the first, throwing several of his own kunai. Enko's smile dropped as her instincts took over. She leapt over the attack, and several kunai slid into her hand. In mid-air, she took aim and threw the first kunai with enough force to pierce through one and hit the second. However, they both dodged the attack. Anko smirked as she threw 2 more kunai at an even higher speed. The first kunai was hit by the second, redirecting it parallel to the ground in another direction. An instant later, the third kunai hit the ground right in front of where the first was going. The first kunai then hit the third. The 2 missing ninja moved in for the kill in mid-air, but then the closest was hit by the first kunai in the shoulder. The ninja screamed, and lost focus. Anko brought her leg around and struck the first ninja, sending him towards the floor. He landed with a sickening thud. The second missing nin thought, a ricocheting kunai? What the hell just happened? Anko smirked, because the second missing nin had not recovered fast enough either. She slammed her last kunai in her hand into the man's skull, killing him instantly. Anko landed on the ground and scanned the area. Several bandits were baring teeth at her. They slowly moved closer to her in bloody anticipation. The radio squawked, "Anko, are we good to go?" Anko muttered, "Yeah. Do it." At that, both Anko and Namikaze pulsed their chakra, activating the mass of explosive seals. Metal and wood shrapnel showered the room at impressive speeds as the walls were blown apart. The bandits closest to the blast area were torn to pieces. Following the creation of several new holes in the walls, the support pillars exploded in secondary blasts. All the bandits looked to the ceiling. It came crashing down to the floor. They had a grand total of 1.2 seconds to escape before the ceiling met the floor. While that would have been a problem for normal people, Anko was a ninja, and decidedly not a normal person. The instant the first explosions occurred, Anko used the distraction to slip through one of the holes in the wall. She had dragged the surviving missing ninja with her, successfully retrieving someone who might know where Gato was. Interlude: Shikamaru and Sasuke's investigation. Part 1. Sasuke pulled himself out of the water just as Naruto did the same. He lasted about 3 minutes while the dobe only lasted 1. However, the boy was just gaining way too fast. It was so frustrating, watching the bottom-rung ninja catching up to him at the rate he was. His thoughts churned, is it me? Is my edge dulling? Then, Sasuke remembered the other jounin he had met. Naruto's skills began to grow at a faster rate after he showed up. Naruto Namikaze, the dobe's alternate, or something. Naruto was resting against the tree, panting really, so Sasuke followed suit. While he rested, he contemplated Namikaze's involvement with Team 7. Flashback: shortly after the ramen stand and their training stint under his eye, Sasuke started researching Namikaze. He began at the library, where he met a surprised Shikamaru, who was there for the same reason. The two began working together to discover the truth. While most ninja information was locked up in either the Hokage's files, such as the Forbidden Scroll, or the Anbu archives, there were a few books on the genealogy of the great Konoha ninja and the declassified missions. Being the brother of the Yondaime, the library should have some records of the legendary ninja's relatives. They spent a whole afternoon in the genealogy section, only to discover there were no records of a Naruto Namikaze. Shikamaru came to the conclusion that Naruto Namikaze could be a cover name for another ninja. To be thorough, they researched the declassified ninja missions, quickly discovering that the declassified missions were really just missions open to the public for training purposes. They still bore the animal classification name for the ninja's protection. Sasuke had learned that Kakashi's old Anbu classification was Inu, dog, and there were a few missions of interest. He set those aside for future research. However, neither Shikamaru nor Sasuke knew Namikaze's animal code name. By the time they finished, they came away with only one bit of knowledge for sure. Prior to 5 years ago, the most recently published genealogy book, Naruto N, didn't exist. For now, their research was stone-walled, until more information could be obtained. The two decided to meet up again in 1 week to continue their research. However, Sasuke received the wave mission before then. Luck was on his side when Namikaze received a mission with a similar destination. Even luckier, Sasuke discovered that Namikaze had been to Wave previously, but something felt off about the information Namikaze gave, like he was holding back half of the story. End flashback. Sasuke's thoughts had to come to an end, because Naruto dragged himself to his feet, and then tried walking on water once again. Sasuke followed shortly after, refusing to lose to the dobe, regardless of whether Namikaze was training Naruto or not. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.